we're going to get into this preseason match. Again, like, take this all for a grain of salt. It's preseason. We're trying things out. We do win. We beat Detroit City 1-0, our first win of the preseason. So shout out to the boys for that. But a team that you should beat, a USL team, one that we had some history with. But yeah, again, appreciate everything that Carter's done this whole preseason, giving us, the tweets and everything. I don't think Detroit City, Sam, even really had like any news about this match.
So what I had noticed, I looked at their stuff on Twitter like beforehand, and it looked like they had done recaps, right? So they had written an article recapping the preseason match, and I think it just came out today. So USL Championship.
That know when the preseason match are, and we're refreshing our screens to see minute by minute updates. Yeah, that's where we're at at this point in the preseason. But Sam, lineup wise, we had a couple different changes here. We finally got our trialist turned Bryan Ramirez. Finally got his visa. He's he got the upgrade from the trialist status. But we went with a different look with the midfield. Kind of break down what we saw with the lineup here.
Yeah, a little bit. So lineup wise, you kind of get a more semi, traditional lineup. But like Ryan said, the big thing that you saw out of this one was the midfield, and that was Bucha, Obi, and Gidi were all in at the same time, right? So you got 3 center mids, two defenders as well. So I'm not sure like what that kind of looked like. I know, Ryan, you had put shouts out there for a false 9, maybe Evander playing more advanced that way, or even playing up top with Denkey. I don't know. I was kind of leaning more closer to Evander and Bucha playing as dueling 10s more than anything. Just because I know at the beginning of last season, immediately in Champions Cup, you saw Bucha get two or three goals within the first couple games, right? So offensively, I think what Pat maybe wants to see is unlocking that for Bucha. I know, coming in, you'd saw the highlights, right? Like coming in when we first signed him, like, oh man, this dude scores in the Champions League. Like he's pretty good. But towards the end of the year, you didn't really see that. So maybe that's what we saw. But Ryan, obviously you saw maybe false 9 or were thinking false 9 when you saw the lineup.
Yeah, because you see, Bucha, Obi, and Gidi all roll in, and that's kind of what we want to see. We want to see Gidi on the field as well. He's very talented, but surrounded, with the experience of Obi and Bucha, maybe we can unlock, his play a little bit more. For me, Obi's got to be that number 6. He's got to be that destroyer, that number 6. You could let Bucha, you could let Gidi kind of roam a little bit more. But is it Evander and Bucha as dueling 10s? Maybe that's kind of what you're saying. Or Evander, like you said, as that advanced false 9. He did a little bit of that with Portland. I could see him potentially working in that space well, as long as him and Denkey are communicating well and passing well there. And even on a press, we need both of them to work hard. I think I touched on that a little bit a few episodes ago as well. But we'll see if they liked it. Ultimately, we only kind of got like an idea on paper of what this was, but could that be something the club rolls out at some point? I think potentially. How can we unlock this offense? How can we get the most out of these players? In seeing Bucha maybe a little bit more forward, like Sam's saying here, he did really well at it last year, but he's had to play, a really solid 8 role where he's had to defend a little bit more. Can we unlock him going forward a little bit more? I think that'd be cool. Matt Miazga is still not available, Sam. That was the other omission. We see Jabari comes back at least as a sub, but no Matt Miazga. So the back line we saw in this one with Gilberto Flores, Teenage Hidebe is back, for this one as well, and Miles Robinson. Past that, you had Ender, Evander, you had on the wing Bryan Ramirez, like we mentioned, and then Denkey up top. So everyone else pretty much typical there. But from all it sounds like, we came out on the front foot as we should, playing a inferior opponent, if you want to say that. I mean, in these matches, who knows what happens in preseason. We're trying things, but we're controlling possession, pushing numbers forward, and creating chances. I think Bryan Ramirez actually hit the post, shortly before Denkey scores. I think Detroit had a goal called back, early on in the first half too. That was clearly offside from what Carter's saying. But then Kévin Denkey, Sam, 3 goals, 3 matches in the preseason. This one comes from the PK strike. Always going to be interesting. Is he going to take it? Is Evander going to take it? But he calmly finishes it from the video that we got from FC Cincinnati. What do you think about Denkey's beard, Sam?
No, yeah, I think somebody had put out there like Buka with the beard, Denke with the beard, right? Like, are we just is this beginning of the beard season since it's going to be, probably decently cold, when we get into MLS play here in February. So, who knows? Who
Yeah.
knows? It looks good, right? As long as he's scoring goals, maybe that's
Oh, it
the thing,
matters.
right? Because with Evander's hair last season, right, we were like, hey, don't cut your hair, like you're on fire, right? Maybe it's Denke with the beard. Maybe he grows it out. I don't know. But Ryan, I think after the goal, not much. I think, like you said, I think Ramirez maybe hits the post again, or I think maybe that is the hit the post before half. But then they had some subs. Hagelin comes in, Anunga comes in, and then you see Evan Laurel come in. And Ryan, I mean, I don't know if you've seen it as much as I have, but I've seen a lot of people, not only like in our comments, but just on the feed. A lot of people want Laurel to start more often this season rather than Celentano.
You see it a lot more in the comment section. I think a lot of people, love LaRoe's play, when Celentano was out. And, honestly, he did really well. So he's earned some minutes there, but I don't know if he's going to take over the spot from Roman. Clearly just based on what we've seen the past, 3, 4 seasons now, he's taken that job. But it is interesting. We talked about it, I think, going into playoffs. That was a big talking point.
Yeah, yeah,
What was going to happen with that. And there's still people kind of calling for that too. And then we're signing, another keeper. So what does that look like as well? But yeah, as we get these subs in the second half, it sounds like from everything that we still, look threatening. You want to see a good mixture of the guys here in preseason and, in situations where you have injuries, like we found ourselves in the last several seasons, honestly, is like, how can these guys integrate well? And how can we call upon our depth? I think, last year I had to say it was probably the deepest team on paper. This year, yet to be seen, what that looks like, at least from a talent standpoint or on paper standpoint. So we see a couple of these guys come in, like Mamba Dem, I think, comes in at wing back. Were you a little bit surprised about that?
I mean, once again, you're trying things out. It just depends on you. You want to find a role for these guys.
Mhm.
Because I know last year we were like, oh, they signed, Bomadem to a first team contract. Are they going to loan him out, right? But if they're going to keep him, you got to find somewhere for him to play. So yeah, I mean, these late substitutions. I mean, as far as what we're reading from Carter and some other people, the tempo kind of dipped, right?
Yeah.
As both sides were rotating a little bit more, and at that point, you're just trying to be more disciplined as a squad. But once again, a little 1-0 victory, Ryan. So I mean, takeaways are this is the first preseason win. We'll take it, right? But once again, you're not seeing a whole lot of creativity up top. Just having one guy scoring the goals right now in preseason is a little worrisome, even though it is just preseason. But you're winning 1-0 against a USL Championship squad who finished 8th last year, and so I mean, I need to see more, or I need to at least hear more, right? As
Well,
far as
that's the thing.
what
It's
Carter's
like,
writing.
this is all just based on writing, and like obviously you see the score sheet, you see who scores, it's a PK. I mean, it sounds like we hit the post, we were knocking at the door. Like that's
Well, it's
that's
not it's not
promising,
all based on writing. I mean, we hear from Pat, we hear from Chris. Like, I
right?
mean, Pat's it seems like he's just as frustrated, right? So I mean, I don't think we didn't hear from him after this match. Maybe Orlando City will hear from him, but I don't know. Right? Ultimately, like, what were your takeaways though?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. We can't just rely upon Kévin Denkey. Like I want to hear more about, like, again, like I talked about last episode, Evander. What's Evander doing, this preseason? Is he creating chances? Is he shooting? I think he had one shot this game that I think was from inside the box early on. The keeper had to make a save on, but I like to see Bryan Ramirez contributing. He had, like I said, one that went off the post. He had a few crosses, and then previous matches, like I'm sure he's been doing that, but we just hadn't heard about it. But I really am intrigued to kind of see how we can unlock that left side, because that was kind of the big question mark last year for this team. So how can we rely upon him in his service, to unlock these guys in the center, and how are we using him to kind of build out of the back? So yeah, that's my takeaway. Ultimately, like, results are results in preseason. We've had, it seems like, again, several chances, but when push comes to shove and we go to Champions Cup and we're winning, 4 or 5-0, like I think we're not going to be too mad, then. But compared to years past, we've had matches, I think even in preseason, Sam, where we've been winning, 2-3-0 or, 3-1 even.
Well, that's Ryan. You got someone in the comments here saying, if we don't at least have 4 or 3-0 victories this year, consider it a flop. Which can't
Yeah.
go. I wouldn't go that far, but
Well, and we just haven't seen that dominance, though. I mean, it's kind of right. Like, we want to see, like, what did Chris Albright say? Like, we want to go and win convincingly. And you beat a USL team in preseason with a PK. But on the flip side, Sam, the first several games we gave up a goal in each respective game. This game didn't give up a goal. Is there some improvement, with the back line there? Um, it's interesting because we're definitely going to have to roll out a little bit of a rotated center back unit to start the season with Miazga. At this point, he's not starting the season, based on timing and
yeah.
what we've seen. So my question to you, Sam, we've been kind of tinkering with who the back three is. I think moving forward, we have a couple preseason matches this week. You're going to start to see that center back unit moving forward to start the season, and they can really get kind of comfortable with each other. And for me, that's probably Nick Hagelin, that's probably Miles Robinson, and that's probably Teenage Adebe.
Yeah, I know we'll touch on it in the second half here. We're gonna kind
Sneak
of
peek.
break down what the defense looks like, but it is interesting going forward the health of our players, and are we gonna bring anybody else in, or are we just gonna try and highlight some of the younger guys? Which, and speaking of the younger guys, right, we picked up another preseason friendly, playing tomorrow, or when you're listening to this via podcast today. Tuesday, February 10th. We're playing Brooklyn FC, who is a new club to the USL Championship. Will begin their first season of play here in 2026 for that. And so we'll likely see probably a rotated squad, considering we have Orlando City the very next day, which was interesting. But I did see today that Carter had said some FCC2 guys have joined the training down in Florida, being Jack Mize, who had just been signed on to FCC2, Will Kiesel, and Felix Sampson. So trying to get some younger guys, hopefully, maybe even see them potentially in the future getting some loans into the USL Championship against that level of competition.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, in some rotation, just because we have a match the next day too. We have a
Yeah.
game on, February 11th as well. So not everyone's going to play, in both matches, and you'll probably see more of the younger guys. Would you imagine, Sam, on the 10th against Brooklyn? I
Oh, yeah.
would think,
Yeah.
and then we play, I think, Orlando the next day, following that. So